Hello and welcome to the second edition of Let's Talk About Privacy. My name is Ola Bini. I am the technical director for Centro de Autonomía Digital here in Quito, Ecuador. And today I'm joined here by Valentín Diaz, who will join me in a conversation about Tor. And before we get started talking about what Tor is and all these things, I would like to ask Valentín to maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, sure. My name is Valentín Diaz. I work as a journalist, have been working as a journalist for approximately 7 or 8 years. Currently I work as a fact checker, and I have previously done some work involving cybersecurity and privacy issues. And my background is specialized in digital verification, so I do a lot of geolocation and a lot of I use a lot of OSINT, open source intelligence techniques, which come from the cybersecurity world, but I apply them to journalism. And as a part of my work covering cybersecurity issues, I have also used Tor browser and other Tor onion services to work.
Great, thank you for being here. And yeah, with your experience and your background, we felt like having you here as a journalist with this technical expertise is something that is very, very rare in this country so far. I mean, for example, I've seen on your Twitter profile that you use GPG to communicate and have encrypted email. And before we go into the whole Tor thing, I have to ask you, did you ever, at El Comercio, did you ever manage to convince any of your colleagues to use encrypted email?
No. I have used with some colleagues ProtonMail, which is like a simple version of GPG. But yeah, I haven't really convinced anyone to use GPG as like the old version of GPG.
Yeah. Has any sources ever contacted you on GPG?
Not yet, but my public key is there. Just in any time, it can happen.
Perfect. No, I'm a strong believer in GPG. In fact, my oldest GPG key goes back to, I think, 2002 or 2001. Of course, I don't have access to any of those anymore, but I've been using GPG for many years. Not only because encrypted mail is about hiding stuff, it's also about normalizing it. It's about showing that actually encryption is something that everyone should be using. It's the same as having doors on our houses. It's the same as having curtains on our windows. It's normal, and it's something that protects us and helps us. Yeah. So hopefully in the future we can convince more of your colleagues and your sources to use encrypted means of communication. So we wanted to talk about Tor today because, there's a lot of reasons to talk about Tor. And Tor, and we will very soon explain what it is, but before I actually explain what it is, it's worth noting that in a few weeks, on the 16th of May, the trial against me is going to continue. And one of the reasons we wanted to talk about Tor is because in the infamous picture that supposedly shows me accessing a system that is supposedly private, the picture implies that the person on the picture or doing the things in the picture was using Tor. And per definition, Tor can't be used to access private things. But it's interesting that some of the public officials in the case have actually on the record in several of the hearings said that I must have been doing something illegal because only people doing illegal things use Tor. And this is an extremely common misconception, and it's extremely dangerous. And at the same time, here at CAD, we are developing tools, we're developing software, and a lot of the tools and a lot of the software that we develop actually is based on Tor or combines with Tor in such a way that it provides better security, better privacy for anyone using it. At CAD, the main mission at CAD is to develop software to protect people's privacy, and we develop only free software, which means that we give it away for anyone to use for whatever purpose, because we believe that software that protects you shouldn't be a privilege, it should be a right for everyone. So, from your perspective, from your understanding, tell me what Tor is.
Well, mainly Tor, I think, is an application in which you can connect through layers. So you have your your out layer, and this is like your home connection, and you go through different nodes to get to your out connection. I don't know what's the name of it in English, but to get from here to here, you go through a lot of layers. Well, that's why the connection is called onion, because well, just like an onion, it has a lot of layers that you have to go through to get to the center of it. So yeah, I think that's the main definition of it, the basic definition of it.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's a great explanation, and the core of this, which is the layers, that's the most important part of Tor, and that is completely consistent with how you describe it. The interesting thing, so first, Tor stands for the onion router. That's what the name literally stands for. And onion routing, exactly as you said, is this idea that you wrap the data and you have different layers. And specifically, those layers are layers of encryption. So each layer of encryption is wrapping the data and wrapping the data. So in fact, with Tor, the standard configuration of Tor, each piece of data that you send from your computer anywhere else on the internet will be protected at some part of the connection. It will be protected by at least 3 layers of encryption. So Tor can be used for many different purposes. One of the purposes is to protect your privacy and security. Another one is to protect your anonymity. And just as you said, like these jumps, they actually serve as a way of hiding where the origin is. So if I want to send a message to a server, if I send the message directly to the server, my ISP, Cloud or CNT or whoever, they will be able to see that I'm communicating with the server. And the server will see my IP address. And anyone else in between will be able to see this communication and basically see that I'm talking to the server. They might not be able to see what I'm saying to the server, but they know that I'm talking to the server. And in some cases, this is enough. Yeah. So the goal of Tor is really to have these routers or nodes, they're sometimes called, and these nodes are servers that exist all around the world. There are, I think right now in the network, over 7,000 different Tor nodes or Tor routers. And when you do a Tor connection, the software on your machine will choose 3 of these completely randomly. So out of 8,000 nodes, you will get 3 of those. And the software will take the keys for each one of these 3, and it will first encrypt all the data to the first node. And then they will take all the encrypted data and it will encrypt it again to the second node. And finally, it will encrypt it a third time to the third node. And this encryption is done in such a way that the 3 different nodes, they have different encryption keys. So the second node will not be able to decrypt whatever the third node has, nor what the first node has. And the way it works is that once you've wrapped all this stuff, your computer sends it to the first machine, and it unwraps the first layer. And then it knows, okay, great. I'm going to send this to the second one. And it sends it to the second one. The second one unwraps that layer. And then the second one sees, okay, I know where I'm going to send this. I'm going to send this to the third node, and it unwraps that. And finally, at the third node, which is sometimes called the exit node, this is where the final data, the actual real data that you wanted to send, is visible to this exit node, and it can send it to the real server you wanted to talk to. But what's brilliant about this is that the server that you're talking to, it doesn't see any communication from you. It only sees the IP address of the Tor node that talked to it. And your ISP doesn't know, Claro or CNT or Telconet, they see a connection from you to the first Tor node, but it doesn't see a connection from you to the server. Yeah. And if you talk to the Tor nodes, the first Tor node only knows that it's talking to you. It knows your IP address, but it doesn't know the server. And it can't know the server because the encryption is hiding it. The second Tor node, it only communicates with the first and the third one. So that one knows nothing. The third one, yeah, sure, it knows the second Tor node and it knows the content that it talks to the real server, but it doesn't know where that content is coming from. In this way, it hides or avoids anyone in between to be able to see your IP address. it is important to remember this thing about the third node. It is very important to keep in mind that this third node can see the content. So if you're using the kind of thing on the internet that is not encrypted, for example, say that you are browsing and you don't have the padlock, you don't have the HTTPS, the secure connection. In that case, anything you send to that server will be visible not only to the server but to that third node. Yeah. It's still better than the alternative, right? The alternative is that like the anyone in between sees all the communication. In this case, it's the exit node that sees the communication. But if you're using passwords and things like that in that communication, that could be a real problem. Yeah. So for this reason, it's still important to also use transport security, such as HTTPS when you're browsing, like you do when you're browsing to your bank, for example. You have the padlock, you have all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's the basics of how Tor actually works. And as you heard in my explanation, Tor is not only a software. In fact, it's a piece of software, and it's this network of all these thousands of nodes that is giving this service to everyone. But it's also a third thing, which is it's actually a non-profit organization in the United States. And this non-profit is in charge of developing the software. They're the ones that actually write the code that does all these things. And they manage a lot of different things.
Yeah. Just to complement your idea, well, the different nodes you have in a Tor connection, well, you can have more than 3. I think you can customize it to have more nodes, yeah. Right? So the different nodes go through different servers across the globe and in different countries. So the first node can be in Indonesia, exactly. And the second node can be in the Netherlands, and the third node can be in the United States or something. So yeah, you go through all this process, so your connection travels around the world, and yeah, if someone intercepts the second node, they're only going to get the IP address from the first node, exactly, and like that. Uh-huh.
Yeah. No. So first of all, you're completely right. If you really feel like 3 nodes doesn't feel safe enough, you can absolutely configure your local Tor software to use more nodes. Most of the time, this is not so common because every node you add makes Tor a little bit slower. Of course, like if you're, I don't know, downloading videos from YouTube, you want the speed of it to be pretty fast, and doing 4 connections or 4 jumps instead of just having like a direct jump to the server is going to make it a little bit slower. Mm-hmm. And if you add 1 more jump, then it's going to be even slower. But more importantly, adding more nodes in a regular Tor connection doesn't increase your security a lot unless you're a person under very specific types of threats. Mm-hmm. And this is where we come into the idea of threat models. And a threat model is this idea that our security decisions should be made based on thinking about what the likely attacks are. So we shouldn't use bad security in a situation where someone can attack us, but we shouldn't use security that is too strong for a situation either. Mm-hmm. Most people in their daily lives don't really need the super security, like fantastic thingies that some people might need. Like, not everyone is a Snowden, and that's okay. Snowden needs his specific security, and the people on the street need their specific security. And if the people on the street try to be Snowden, their lives are going to be very complicated, and it's going to be very hard to do anything. Mm-hmm. I can tell you this from first-hand experience because, of course, since I'm being attacked by the government of Ecuador, as a matter of fact, I have security procedures for my computer and for my things that I would not recommend to other people because, to be honest, they're extremely annoying. But they are things that I feel is appropriate for my situation. So when it comes to adding more Tor jumps, you can do that if your situation needs it. And as you say, the Tor nodes can be anywhere in the world, and anyone can run their own Tor node, anyone can contribute. In fact, I have a lot of friends who contribute Tor nodes to the network. It's a charitable thing. Mm-hmm. I actually do it myself. I have a few Tor nodes that I am contributing to the network. I have no idea who is using them. I have absolutely no idea what traffic goes through them because it's encrypted. Some of them are in France, some of them are in Holland, in the Netherlands, some of them are in Germany. And all these things are, like you say, it could be in Indonesia, it could be Australia, it could be anywhere on the planet. And one jump from one node can go totally from one side of the world to the other side of the world. And that's very, for me, it's a very powerful, inspiring message as well. There's like 7,000 or 8,000 computers around the world that people are just giving away in order to make it so that everyone on the planet can be a little bit more secure, a little bit more private. So we have two different ways of using Tor, right? Like I can use Tor as a developer, I can write code that uses Tor and is specialized for it. But at the same time, you as a journalist, you're not going to do it the same way. You just want to use Tor and get access to the kinds of things and protection that you get from Tor. So how were you using it?
Yeah, in my experience, I have used it in two ways. First one is for browsing through the deep web. So in my experience, I have covered some cyber attacks here in Ecuador that have had some data leaks of the clients of a bank or of the telecommunications company, public company here in Ecuador. And cyber criminals often do the following. So they open up a server in Tor, and they upload a sample of the data, of the leaked data. So what I do to verify that cyber attack happened is I access the Tor address, the onion address, and I download the data. I do that in a secure system. Either it's a USB stick where I go through a live system, so it doesn't crash my main operating system. And so I established the store connection and I download it from there, because most cyber criminals do their stuff on Tor. That's no secret. So I go to the address, I download the data, and then I open it and I verify it. But I have also used it for other purpose, and this other purpose is to send files through a secure in a secure way. So for that I use OnionShare, which is another Tor service, which is I think it's pretty good. I first heard about OnionShare when there was when the Snowden case was happening, and I saw a news article in which Glenn Greenwald, who was working at that time for The Guardian and working on the Snowden case, he was stopped in the Brazilian airport, I think, and his gear got confiscated. So then the Tor management decided to develop a more secure way in which you can send files from one place to another, so you don't have to carry devices and stuff, physical devices. So it's like Google Drive, but you apply the same principle of going through different nodes, so you can send or receive files.
Great. So you were just telling me how in your journalistic work you really use Tor in two different ways. You used it to access sites on the so-called deep web, and I want to come back to this whole deep web thing later because it's a very interesting thing. And secondly, you also used OnionShare in order to transfer files in a secure way. And I think that those two are fantastic use cases for Tor. Let's start with the first one. And actually, let's start with an even previous use case, which is, okay, what if you want to use Tor to get privacy and security and anonymity while doing normal web things, not accessing criminal sites on the web, or dark web, or something like that? I assume that you use the Tor browser bundle in order to access these sites?
Yeah. Are we talking about like normal web browsing or onion sites?
Well, both of them, right? And we'll come back and talk a little bit more about onion sites specifically, but for now, let's talk about regular browsing.
Okay, so in regular browsing, my experience hasn't been like so pleasant because as you have these notes, certain services like, well, I use a lot, as I do verification, I use a lot of social media, I use Google accounts, sock puppet accounts, they're called. So my experience is that these services block my onion connections. So I usually don't use Tor browser to browse through common sites. I do know that, for example, Proton Mail and some services like, I think even Twitter has an onion site. So there are some services in which you can access through a Tor connection. But the most of the time the types of things I do for work, an onion connection doesn't suit me.
Okay. Yeah, so let's take a step even further back. Okay, so if you've never heard of Tor before and you want to try it out, what do you do? Well, Tor, as we talked about, Tor is really something that you can use in any kind of network connection. So your email client you can use with Tor, your browser you can use with Tor, your chat program you can use with Tor. In theory, you can use anything with Tor because Tor basically just sits, it basically wraps all the network traffic that you do. Now, so that means that you could just download Tor and you could install Tor and you could run it and then you could configure your browser to use this Tor. You could use, I don't know, Edge or Firefox or Chrome, and you could just configure it to use Tor. Most of the time, this is not really a good idea. And it's something that the Tor project, they recommend against, because the problem is that a browser leaks information. And the whole point of being anonymous is that it should be hard for someone looking at your connection to intercept and understand who you are. And there are many different things that a browser does that is really bad for anonymity and for privacy and security. So, and it's also doing this configuration of making Chrome use Tor, for example. It's not easy. It's hard enough that I haven't tried doing it for a few years because it's so frustrating to do, and you have to test really carefully to see that you didn't miss a configuration somewhere or that something changed. In order to avoid all these different problems, the Tor project, they have two different pieces of software. So they have the Tor software, which really is invisible. It sits in the back of your computer, you don't really touch it, you don't really talk to it, it just sits there. And then they have another piece of software, which is called the Tor browser bundle. And the Tor browser bundle is this software that is based on the Firefox browser, but it's been modified with extensions that protect your privacy in a lot of different ways. So you download that and you start it up, and it will automatically put you on the Tor network. And anything you do inside of the Tor browser is going to be protected by Tor. And you can use it to go to regular websites, and in some cases you will have trouble, exactly like you mentioned, because sadly a lot of people use Tor to send spam, for example. So some websites they block Tor. Other websites they do this thing where you have to fill in a CAPTCHA or prove that you're a human and not a robot or something like that. So in some cases it can be a little bit frustrating, but at the same time, say for example, say that you're doing research about something and you want to be sure that you're doing this in a safe and secure environment. Even if you're not using onion sites, you can still do that through the Tor browser in order to be safer, basically. And you know, all the browsers these days, they have the incognito mode or they have the privacy mode or private mode, and that doesn't do anything. Yeah. So if you need to go to Google and you need to search something, or you need to search on any of the search engines out there that you don't want to have linked back to you or linked to anything else you do, then using the Tor browser can be quite helpful for that. The other thing that can be really helpful, if you download this Tor browser bundle and you just start it, it will put you in a different place of the world. So if you want to, I don't know, if you want to see what the news look like, for example, say that you're in a country in the Middle East where you think that there's censoring happening. Maybe the news look differently. What if CNN gives you a different website if you're in Libya compared to if you're in the United States? Well, using Tor, you can connect from the United States to the website and see if the news are different, for example.
Yeah.
So there are many powerful things you can do, but yes, it does come with some risks as well.
Yeah. Yeah, a great example about that is the great firewall that China has.
Yes, exactly.
And if you go to Google Images from China and you type the Tiananmen Square, you will only see pictures of the square as it is, but you won't see the pictures that we with the historical pictures that we see of these massive protests and the massacres that occurred in the 90s.
Absolutely, absolutely. But there are other interesting examples. For example, I think there was a researcher that tried using Google Translate from different countries, and this researcher used the same phrase in the from language and the to language. The only difference was that they were connecting as if they were connecting from different countries. And Google Translate, in some cases, did different results depending on if you were coming from a Latin American country or from Turkey or from the United States, which is very, very interesting. So I would say the Tor browser bundle is a very easy way to get started with Tor. You just download it, you just start it as if it's any browser, and you start browsing. Of course, there are some issues that you have to be aware of. Not every site will work the same. The Tor browser bundle, one of the things that I like about it is it has protections. So for example, it will protect you from ads. It will protect you from different types of attack scripts and other things as well. Of course, that also means that in some cases, websites won't work as they are expected to work, because in some cases it's hard to tell the difference between the regular functionality and functionality meant to attack you. Yeah. But it's the kind of thing where I can use the Tor browser and I just feel a little bit more safe doing it. And that's especially more important if you're doing things like, for example, say that you are on a public Wi-Fi, you're in an airport or you're in a cafe, for example, and you connect to the Wi-Fi that's there. In some cases, these Wi-Fis are not very well protected. And if you are using websites that do not use HTTPS, that means that anyone that's sitting there can intercept your traffic and understand what's going on. And one of the good ways of avoiding exactly this is to use the Tor browser. And the only thing you need to do different is, instead of starting Firefox or Chrome, you just start the Tor browser and you surf using that instead under these circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, although there are many organizations that block the access to Tor connections. That used to happen in my previous job. I think I tried to establish a Tor connection at some point, and I had the connection blocked. And yeah, in that case, I had to whenever I had to do something through a Tor connection, I would do that from home.
So your workplace noticed that you were using Tor and they stopped you from, or like it stopped the connection to the Tor network? Yeah. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is, I thought you meant the other way around, but yeah, this is also a problem. Exactly like you say, like some places feel that using Tor is a problem. Yeah. And this, going back to places that are under censorship, in some cases, for example, in certain countries, you can't download Tor because the website for Tor is blocked. Mm-hmm. In other countries, for example, in China, it's tricky to use Tor because the Great Firewall, as you mentioned, it recognizes what Tor traffic looks like and it tries to cut it off. Mm-hmm. There are ways around this. The Tor project actually has when you start a Tor browser these days, you usually get what's called like the connection wizard that asks you, okay, are you in a normal setting or in a normal place that allows connections to Tor, or do you need to do things to get out of the current place in a way that is not standard? And these are, so this is a little bit technical, but those methods are usually called something like obfuscated proxies. And the idea is that instead of just talking directly to the Tor servers, it will hide your traffic in a way that it makes it look like something else. It might look like traffic to Skype, or it might look like you're talking to Google Drive, but in fact, you're talking to the Tor network. And it's quite cool. There are several methods of this obfuscation protocols, and one of the newest one, actually, it's been around for 5 or 6 years at least. I heard a presentation about it in 2015 or 2016, and it's something called Snowflake. And it actually is really interesting because it runs as a plugin inside a normal browser, so that other people using the Tor network inside of censored regions can use your connection inside of your regular browser to evade the censorship and then get access to the Tor network. And during the recent conflict between Russia and Ukraine, both sides and populations in both countries have had trouble actually accessing accurate information. And there is definitely censorship of Tor going on in both countries as well. And the Tor network has seen a huge increase in the use of the Snowflake method of evading exactly that. So Tor is being used to access information in these countries, and Snowflake is used to avoid the censorship. Mm-hmm. So even in these kind of situations, there are ways around it. It's a little bit more complicated because the situation is more complicated, but Tor allows you to get around this kind of censorship as well.
Yeah, I've heard about the use of Snowflake also in Cuba in the last protests that we have seen last year. Mm-hmm. Cuba is also a country that has a lot of internet censorship, mm-hmm. and yeah, it has been a solution for Cubans. For Cuban activists or for Cuban journalists in that sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned earlier that when you did your investigations, you used like a USB drive, so that and you used a live system so that you could avoid contaminating or danger, like putting your regular operating system in danger, right? Mm-hmm. Was it Tails you were using, or were you using something else?
Yeah, well, I sometimes use Tails. I sometimes use Kali. I sometimes use Ubuntu. Mm-hmm. It depends on the situation. But yeah, most of the time when I did research on these cyber attacks, I'd use Tails.
So, Kali, isn't that what all the cyber criminals use? Isn't it isn't it only used for criminal use cases?
Yeah, it's supposed to, but anyone can use Kali. Uh-huh. Here's the thing, we have like this stigma over all these kind of tools, whether it's Kali or whether it's Tor, that only cyber criminals use these tools. Cyber criminals use these tools. That's no secret. But there are lots of people that also use this kind of tools, and that includes ethical hackers, and that includes journalists, that includes researchers, that includes a lot of people that are into the digital world. So I use Kali because sometimes because it has many it comes with many tools pre-installed, especially to do some social engineering research. I'm not a programmer, so I don't use like Nmap or stuff like that. But I use things like Spiderfoot or tools like this that are mostly to pre-investigation. I use Kali and I use Tor, and it's not a crime.
That's good to hear. I was worried there for a second. Now, so Tails is a system that I'm very well familiar with. In fact, here at CAD, we have actually contributed to the Tails project because it's something we believe is a very, very useful tool. In fact, I use Tails as my daily operating system. I don't even have another operating system. I do all my work, everything I do in Tails. So for the audience, so Tails is the Amnesiac Incognito live system. And so this is, you put Tails on a USB drive and you can start it up from the USB drive and it works like a regular operating system. But there are a few things that are different. The first one is that everything you do will go to Tor. It doesn't allow you to do anything outside of Tor unless you actually make some changes to the system. But by default, everything you do is going to be done through Tor, and if it's not possible to do it through Tor, it's not going to actually let you do it. So it stops you from doing things that could be dangerous. So if you're a journalist working on, I don't know, the Panama Papers or something like that, you might want to do your work inside of Tails because it stops a lot of really dangerous things from happening. And the other thing that's really weird about Tails, and it might sound strange to you at first, but it doesn't remember anything. Like your regular operating system, like every time you start it up, it remembers exactly who you are. It remembers everything you did last time. It remembers all the sites you've ever visited. It remembers everything. It's kind of scary if you start thinking about it, like that your operating system, it knows more about you than probably your partner does. But Tails is not like that. It's amnesiac. Every time you start it up, it will, by default, it will forget everything. Now, of course, that's not really sustainable. So if you want to do certain kinds of work, you can ask it to, hey, please remember this piece of information for me, but nothing else. Yeah. And so that's very useful. So that's how I use it. Like I have it remember the things I wanted to remember, but everything else it forgets. But the other thing that is really cool about it is also there are a lot of different types of digital attacks that can happen. And using Tor protects you from a lot of them. Having an amnesiac system that forgets everything is a good protection against these things. But Tails also contains a lot of other things. So the Linux kernel that is used inside of Tails have very specific protections applied to it. The memory, the RAM memory is wiped completely clean, so there are no remnants or passwords or anything like that left in the memory after you used it. And there are many other protections that it actually does for you. So, but even if you don't use these things where it remembers, even if you don't use it as a regular operating system, Tails is great for the purposes you mentioned. Like if you need to do some research, you just put in a USB drive, you start it up, and you can start browsing on using the Tor browser, and you can find out the things you do, and you know that none of what you do there will have any effect on your regular computer. You will not be infected by viruses, you will not be attacked, and there will be no remnants left. And that's really powerful.
And if you are attacked, you can just throw your USB to the garbage and install another one.
Exactly, right? You just download a new image, you verify that it's the correct one, you put it on a USB drive, and everything is fine.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you something about Tails, because I'm not, well, I've always heard that besides a Tor connection, you should always use a VPN.
Okay.
But a VPN is like not recommended for Tails. Can you explain why?
So just to be clear about the terminology, like so a VPN or a proxy is a generic way that most computers know how to do that allow you to connect to a different point and have all your traffic or some of your traffic go through that place. And for example, a typical example of a VPN would be like an office network. Say that we have all of our resources in our office, we can have a VPN so that if you're working from home, but maybe we have a file server here, if you're working from home and you need to access files on the file server, you can use a VPN to connect and a VPN basically acts as, even if you're at home with your computer, it looks as if you're on the network. It's like it fakes your presence. That's kind of the corporate official office way of using it. But the other way of using it is to use a VPN as a proxy. And that's basically like if you're at home and you're connected to the VPN in the office, when you route your traffic there, that means that the traffic will seem like it's coming from the office. So that's really what a VPN is. It's a type of proxy that allow you to get your traffic to come from another place. And with this description, it's clear that Tor really is a type of proxy as well. It's just a very special type of proxy. And the question then is, okay, can you combine Tor with other proxies? And that comes back to asking yourself a question of threat modeling again, right? So before we look at the combination, let's just think about like, okay, a VPN or a proxy, what is the threat model for those? In general, if I were to use a proxy, I don't really have a corporate VPN. Like, I made that up. We are not that big of an enterprise in this association. So I don't have a VPN that I can connect to like a big VPN. So if I were to use a proxy, the way I would do that is that I would maybe maybe I would buy time from Mullvad or from maybe from Proton, because there are companies around the world that all of them offer VPNs or proxies as a service, and you pay a little bit of money and you get the connection information, and you can basically configure your phone or your computer to connect to this thing. Now, what is the risk? Well, rather, what are you protecting yourself against? Well, it's very similar to what we talked about for Tor, right? All your connections will go to the VPN or to the proxy instead of to the place you want to go. So your ISP, Claro or CNT, they will not see what you're doing. Anyone in between will not see what you're doing. However, the difference here is that the VPN or the proxy is operated by one person or one entity. And that means that that entity will see all the things you do. So yeah, sure, your ISP will not see those things, but instead, it's the proxy provider that will see all of it. And maybe you trust Proton, but it doesn't matter if you trust them or not. At the end of the day, if they can see all the traffic, that means that all the traffic goes through one point, and that's a single point of failure, and that means that they know everything. Mm-hmm. They can see all the traffic, all your passwords, everything. Of course, the server that you're talking to, they don't really see your IP address, they see the IP address of the VPN or the proxy instead. But depending on which proxy solutions you're using, that might give away some information, but not all information. So the difference between Tor and the proxy is that with the proxy, you still have one place where all your data goes through and someone can find out all that data. With Tor, that place doesn't exist. By dividing out the responsibilities in those different places and having the different places owned by different people, you're removing that single point of failure. And that's the biggest difference. So let's talk about what you would like to hide. Okay, so you can do two things, right? You can put a proxy before the jump into the Tor network. So that would mean that your computer connects first to the proxy, and then the proxy connects to the Tor network. Mm-hmm. What would this protect you against? Well, in this situation, the proxy would see the traffic of everything you're doing instead of the first node. So that means that your IP address, your personal IP address, would be a little bit protected from the first node in the Tor network. Mm-hmm. Of course, the proxy provider would still see that you're talking to the proxy network, but they would to the Tor network, but it would be encrypted. So the proxy provider wouldn't really see what is going on. They would just know that you're using Tor. That's the only thing they would know. The Tor network would not know your IP address at any point in time. And then finally, the same analysis is done, like the exit node would still see the traffic, the server would see the exit node, and so on and so on. So in this case, you are protecting your IP address from being viewed by any computer in the Tor network. Mm-hmm. The other alternative would be to do it the opposite way, which is that all your traffic would go from the exit node to the proxy, and then the proxy would do the real traffic to the server. Personally, what this would do is that it would protect your traffic from the from the exit node. So the exit node wouldn't see any unencrypted traffic, and the exit node wouldn't know where your traffic is going. However, the proxy provider would still know where your traffic is going, and it would see the content of all the stuff that is not encrypted. And what's worse, at some point, you have to create an account for the proxy, right? Yeah. So the proxy provider would be able to know your account name, and maybe it's a fake account name, and maybe you protect it yourself, so it's a random account name. But the proxy provider would still be able to see all the traffic you ever do, all the servers you go to, and all unencrypted traffic, and connect that together. And if you at any point make a mistake where your traffic contains any information about you, the proxy provider has enough to de-anonymize you. So for me, the stronger variation, and well, I have a first draft of a book about a lot of these things, and I talk a lot about this scenario actually. It's not really out there yet, but what I say there is if you're going to combine proxies and Tor, in general, the recommended or the better way to do it is to do first you connect to the proxy, and then through the proxy you connect to the Tor network. That gives you better protection, and since the exit node is random, and it changes a lot, that means that there is no single point that can collect information about you. So you are, by adding the proxy after the Tor network, you're actually reducing your anonymity. But by adding it before, you can increase your anonymity a little bit. The only question is it worth it? And in most cases, for most people, there is not really value in that. The only strong use case for this situation that I would recommend is exactly what we talked about before. Say that Tor is blocked, but you have a proxy connection that works. In many countries, like VPN and proxy connections are actually allowed because corporations are using them. So if you have that situation, you're in a country where Tor is not actually allowed. If you can't use any of the obfuscating proxy solutions and you have a proxy solution, use the proxy and then connect to the Tor network. That's a great use case. It's a little bit tricky to configure, but it's a good use case.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about onion share because, you know, and before we talk about onion share, we need to talk about onion services. How do you understand onion services? How do you view, like, in your own words, how would you describe them, what they are?
Okay, so it's a little bit more complicated because onion services are more wide than onion, like Tor browser.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I have the concept very clear about onion services as this wide concept. Yeah. So if you can go through it.
Absolutely, yeah, because onion services, they are, I think you probably know how to use them, but understanding what they are, that's a very different beast. So let's take a step back. When you use your browser, right, you put in a name, and you might know, as a technical journalist, you might know that like the DNS system is used to transform a name into an IP address, and then the IP address is what you're actually using to talk to a server. So you go to www.google.com, and your browser will first ask, hey, what's the actual IP address? And then it will go to that IP address. Now, onion addresses, they are a little bit like that, in that they are something that you can use to locate a resource or to get access to a resource in some way. And to go back to the same example, imagine you're using the Tor browser. You put in google.com. Okay, fine. It's going to use these 3 hops that we talked about, and it's going to then go to the Google server. Now, Facebook has exposed their service not only at facebook.com. You can also use an onion address to access Facebook. So what this really means is that instead of putting in facebook.com in the Tor browser, you put in this long string of digits and letters, and then it ends with .onion. And when you do that, something really, really interesting happens. Instead of doing these 3 jumps in the Tor network and then jumping outside of the Tor network to the Google or the Facebook server, an onion server stays inside of the network. So basically, an onion address allows you to put anything inside of the Tor network in such a way that when you're accessing that, it will never leave the network. There is no exit node that sees the raw traffic. The traffic goes all the way to the endpoint. So Facebook has basically a server that is inside of the Tor network, and when you put in this long string of digits and letters, you go directly to that server. Actually, it's interesting. We talked about the 3 jumps and the 3 nodes. Onion services actually uses 6 jumps. Because the way it works is that you can think about it as if Facebook's onion service and you each do 3 jumps. And then you meet in the middle. And that's how the connection is made, and that's how the traffic actually flows. What is the benefit of this? Well, there's a huge amount of encryption. 6 layers, that's a lot of data or a lot of encryption. That's great. We avoid the problem of the exit node seeing the traffic. But there is also another thing which is very interesting, which is that this long string of letters and numbers. It's not like google.com. It's not something we can remember. Instead, that is actually a key. And what that means is that if you use the right address, there's no way anyone can intercept that connection, because by using the right address, you are guaranteed to be communicating with the real entity. And there's no way of doing this kind of attack in the middle attack where someone else goes in the middle. Like, for example, if you try to go to google.com and your browser will use the IP address, Claro or CNT or your ISP, they can actually act as if they are that IP address, and they can respond from that. They can fake it. That's not possible with onion services. And this is a feature that it's called, basically that the address is self-authenticating. If you have the address, you have enough information to know that you're talking to the right entity. So that's really, really powerful. These onion services, they can be used for other things. You don't only use them with web services or websites. They can also be used to communicate directly with remote shells to servers or any other traffic you can set up like that. It's very powerful. And this is where I wanted to go with Onion Share, because actually the really cool thing that happens when you use Onion Share, and just to explain, Onion Share is a small program that you can start up on your machine, and you can basically tell this program, hey, I want to share this file. So you choose the file on your computer or a directory or whatever, and it gives you an Onion address. And then you can give that Onion address to someone else, and they can navigate to that Onion address, and they can directly download the files from your computer. And what's really cool is that this doesn't use anything in between. There is no server. It's autonomous, it's decentralized. Your computer is the server that is serving the file. And the reason why this can work is exactly because of these powerful Onion services. What Onion Share will do is it will start up, and it will create a new Onion service. It will put your computer inside of the Tor network, and then the other person can access that and download the file directly. Yeah. So this is a great example of the kind of tool that you can use to transfer information. In fact, here at CAD 2 years ago, we developed a very small tool called Wahai. And the goal of Wahai is to do a little bit the same as Onion Share does, but for conference calls. Of course, we know that in the pandemic, everyone was using Zoom for absolutely everything. And we know that the servers of Zoom, they are somewhere where we don't control them. And Zoom, they say that they have encryption, but do we really believe them? It's unclear, right? So if you want to be sure that no one is intercepting your communication, you should run your own server for doing conference calls. One of the open source and free software ways you can do this is with a software called Mumble. And Mumble is not video, it's only voice. And actually, I've been using it with many friends for many years. And it's like, it has clients for your phone, for your browser, for your desktop and everything. And it's very simple to connect. And you go in and you can be in a group and you can talk. In fact, Mumble was developed originally to be part of video games that allow you to, like these kind of collaborative, like World of Warcraft style games when you can like talk with everyone in your group. So Mumble was designed for this purpose. So it's very fast. It has really good support for talking in conferences. And only that. However, setting up your own Mumble server is not nice. It's the kind of thing where, okay, first of all, you need to be a technically minded person, and you need to have a server, and you need to know how to configure that and secure it and doing all that stuff.
Yeah, and it means you must have a computer running.
Exactly. It's very, very frustrating. Mm-hmm. So what we were thinking was, okay, what happens if you can run a Mumble server on your computer that is exposing Onion service? And that's exactly what we did. So we basically have this program Wahai that when you start it up, if you want to start a conference call, what's going to happen is that Mumble will start in the background. We will put the computer inside of the Tor network. You will get an Onion address. Anyone else can connect to that Onion address with Mumble, and they're part of the conference call. There are no servers, and this is secure and encrypted everywhere around it. So we get, by default, we get all the security and privacy benefits. Like the anonymity doesn't even matter in this use case, because the privacy and the security is so important in what Wahai gives us. And it's super simple tool. You just start it and you just use it. And it's very similar to Onion Share in that way, in that it uses the power of the Tor network to provide a capability that is really, it would have been really hard to do without Tor.
Yeah, but how did you manage to resolve the latency that a Tor connection usually generates?
This is the benefit of using a tool like Mumble, where you know we've been using, me and many friends, we've been using Mumble over Tor for many years. I've used Mumble from inside of Tails, and we know that, like, okay, I have a friend who has a Mumble server in Germany. Everyone connects to that Mumble server over Tor, and we can still have voice-to-voice conversations. One of the things that is really great about Mumble is that, first of all, since it's not using video, video is the thing that takes a lot. Like, that's why with Zoom, like, someone has connection problems. Okay, can you please turn off your video? Yeah. And it usually gets better, right? So video takes a lot of bandwidth. Voice doesn't need a lot of bandwidth, and Mumble is really good at using. Basically, it reduces the quality in a really clever way when there is not enough bandwidth. But what we've noticed with experimentation is that actually the latency and the bandwidth it just works with Tor. Tor is fast enough together with Mumble that it just doesn't become a problem. So we weren't sure that was going to be the case, so we did a lot of testing, and just empirically we saw that actually, yeah, it works.
That's great, because when I use the Onion Share, for example, if I compare it to other drive services like Google Drive or Mega or something like that, they work super fast, and in the time, if I use Google Drive and I want to download I don't know, 10 gigabyte file, maybe it would take it around 15 minutes or something like that. But when I establish a connection through Onion Share, it can take 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And this comes back to, like, remember, each jump is 6 or 7 jumps. So each byte has to jump many times around the world to actually get to the point. And there is a lot of encryption and data transfer. When you talk about a lot of data, that's the kind of thing that does take, it does become worse with Tor. Absolutely. So that's where voice, for example, is a good use case. We also, in KoiIM, our chat client, we have it configured to always use Tor and always use Onion services if it can. And of course, we're sending text that is encrypted, but still text. So we're like small pieces of data. We are having a great conversation, and I have so many more things that I wanted to talk to you about, because your experience and input as a journalist is super helpful. I think maybe we should start winding down because we're running out of time. But before we do that, I do want to talk about this deep web, dark web kind of thing. Because everyone talks about it like, oh, Tor is only for the dark web, and Tor is only for the criminals and all these things. And of course, you mentioned earlier that you've been using Tor for accessing this kind of information and this kind of data. So how do you see the deep web or dark web? Like, what is it in your mind, or the way you see it?
The concept that is stored on my mind is the difference between deep web and dark web is that we only see, usually we only see like a small percentage of what's out there in the internet through Google or through the usual services that we use every day. But there are some like services or files that are available in the web that you can't find on a search engine. So I think that's the primary definition of the deep web. Like, there's so much stuff that many organizations have around the globe that are uploaded to the internet, but that you cannot access unless you have the address to it. So the deep web is just a concept of how enterprises and companies and organizations work besides or beyond the public addresses that they have online.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so I think my definition is very similar to yours, but I'm going to take it one step longer, or further. So, first of all, for me, deep web, dark web, everyone uses these terms more or less the same. So I'm just going to say, like, the deep web is exactly what you were saying, in that it's the content that is not really reachable through search engines. So as you say, like the concept of the deep web, you have like an iceberg, you see the tip of it, but you don't see the rest of it. But the interesting thing comes in when we think about what that actually means. So, quiz. What do you think is the biggest site on the deep web?
Yeah, I don't have an idea. It's a good question.
It's actually Facebook.
Okay.
Per definition, right? Like content that is not indexed by a search engine. And Facebook has all that content and it's not available to any search engine. They control access to it very clearly. They have all that data. So according to the official definition of deep web, the deep web is really Facebook. Everything else is like, and even worse, like if we look at these, for example, we talk about criminal forums and these kind of message boards that exists only accessible through onion services, for example. I wouldn't call them the deep or the dark web because almost all of them are actually indexed. Most of these kind of releases of leaked data from different places, there are search engines for that stuff. Okay, sure, it's not Google, but there are search engines that indexes that stuff.
Just two examples to complement that idea. I do a lot of digital verification, so I always use, for example, Google Images or Yandex Images to know if a photograph has been used earlier in the internet.
Maybe just to add, like Yandex is a Russian search engine, and it's fantastic for something that's basically called reverse image search, where you can give it an image and it tells you other places where similar images exist, and it's really cool actually.
So when I use this type of search engines, I will never get content from Facebook. I can find content from Twitter, I can find content from VK or other social networks, but I will never find content that is available on Facebook. So for my work, when I used to cover cyber attacks, I used a lot Raid forums, which was shut down recently. And I think the owners of that are in jail now. But I used it, and that was you could find the information that was there. You could find it on Google. You could access through the normal web. Like stuff that are going in the criminal are going on in the criminal world, you can find them in fact when you talk about hard stuff like child pornography and stuff like that, it is interesting that there are those type of content more in user services like Facebook or Google Drive or stuff like that. It's more than you can imagine, and it's not only on the dark web services or these dark forums and hidden in dark places. Like you can find those type of content, criminal content, in normal social media, normal service.
Yeah, this is actually something that I've heard from investigators and law enforcement officers, that actually the primary means that these kind of things, this kind of material is distributed is actually through WhatsApp and Telegram. And so that's the other deep web, so to speak. So just touching on this theme before we end. In the beginning, we were talking a little bit about how, like, okay, criminals are using Tor. That doesn't mean that using Tor makes you a criminal. I don't know, do you want to add anything to these ideas, or what do you say to people that like Tor shouldn't exist because it enables this kind of crime?
Yeah, I would like to add that, yeah, criminals do use Tor, and again, it's not a secret. But what happens if you take out Tor from the panorama, from the global perspective? It means that you have a lot of countries in which people will be censored, and people will not be allowed to access content. Internet is supposed to be a safe place where you can where you can get your information, communicate with other people. If you are an activist, if you are a journalist, if you are a programmer, the internet should be a place where you can express yourself, or you can just find information. But there are many countries that block that content. So the onion services is a way out of it, and it's the best way of fighting censorship that I have found. So if you take down onion services just because of cyber criminals, you're also allowing a lot of dictators around the world to block your access to information.
Yeah, absolutely. Freedom of expression and freedom to information is super important and very, very much under attack as digital rights. But not only that, also privacy and security in general. I agree completely that it would be a very bad thing for people in censored countries. But at the same time, people in countries that are surveilled would also suffer from this kind of thing. So even if you're not being censored, you can still be surveilled, you can still be attacked in many different ways. And without Tor, I think that the security of people around the world would decrease significantly. I keep saying, like, when it comes to these kind of discussions, we know that criminals use cars. That doesn't mean that we decide as a society that cars shouldn't be allowed. Maybe we should, because they pollute and they cause a lot of injuries, and traffic at this time in Quito is not so nice. But at the end of the day, we as a society, we make decisions about what we believe is valuable enough that even if a very small percentage use them for bad things, we still believe that the good can come out of it is much more important. And I think that for Tor, that's how I see it. It's a tool, it's a powerful tool, and that's why it's very, very valuable for us to have it. Great. We could continue with many different topics, and I think next time we do a talk show about Tor, we will cover more issues. I really appreciate this conversation, and it's very interesting to hear you as a actually professional working with these kind of issues and using Tor professionally. We have an idea of how these things work because we build these kind of tools, but sometimes hearing from people that actually use them is very enlightening, I would say. So thank you so much for your participation. If people want to get hold of you in some way, how can they reach you?
Most of it through Twitter. You can put a banner or something.
Yeah, sure. We'll put it in the description or something. And if they search on Valentín Diaz, they will find you.
Yeah, sure. I'm Valentín Diaz, and you can contact me through Twitter. If you DM me, I will give you my Signal contact or my GPG contact, whatever you prefer.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for participating. This has been the second edition of Let's Talk About Privacy, talking about Tor and how Tor can be a powerful tool for good. And more importantly, using Tor does not make you a criminal. Criminals sometimes use Tor, but using Tor certainly doesn't make you a criminal. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.